this for more than one reason. One reason is to simply gather my thoughts and reflect. I need to continue processing this pivotal process I have experienced. Another reason is that I might be able to convey my position to those close to me. This may allow me to order my thoughts in a way that my loved ones can understand where I am coming from. One more reason I'm doing this is for my memory. I don't feel like I have a great memory in general, and I'm sure I'm already forgetting the small events that have brought me to the position I hold today. So I'll try to recount what has happened as best I can. Where should I begin? I think it started when I was working at an assembly plant, and working that assembly line was mind-numbingly boring. To deal with this, I started listening to podcasts. I had cell phone service at the time, but it was a plan without data in order to save money, so I would download shows to listen to while I was working. I was interested in history shows, conspiracy and UFO shows, political shows, comedy shows, and religious shows. At some point, I switched to a cell phone plan that included data, so I was able to start streaming podcasts and music, and I used an app that would play just the audio from YouTube. Now, the order of events here I can't be sure of. I do want to say that I will probably get some of these details wrong, even though it's my own life. At some point in there, I started going through the divorce process. More on this later. I want to discuss it, though, in order to explain where my head was throughout all this. What actually started this process for me was curiosity. At some point, I became interested in the claims of evolution. I don't know why. I was raised in a home that taught me everything I needed to know about it. I learned how foolish the scientists espousing evolution were. I learned that all the dating methods they had come up with were severely flawed. I learned that they used circular reasoning to come to their conclusions. I learned that if you put garbage data into their models, you get garbage data out. I learned that the evolutionists are frequently deceptive, trying to pass off their spurious evidence as fact and misconstruing all their findings. Although I learned all these things and wholeheartedly believed every word, I was still curious what they were actually saying. I never heard the presentation from the other side. Why would I even bother trying to find the information from them when they are so deceitful? I don't know. The first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. So finding myself stuck on that dreaded assembly line for 9 full hours a day, I did a few YouTube searches and looked for a lengthy introductory video addressing the topic. I came across a YouTube channel called Potholer54 and a video called The Theory of Evolution Made Easy. That channel actually had a whole slew of videos addressing the topic, as well as related topics that I didn't clearly distinguish between. Anything having to do with an old Earth or old universe, or anything that contradicted the Bible in this way, I essentially labeled evolution in my mind and moved on. I quickly began to see the topic in a new light, as I had never been presented so much of the information Potholer54 conveyed. Something interesting that he did was not to only cite the sources he would often reference, but he would present the text of the original source in a detailed way as well. Growing up, the evolutionist quotes would usually be presented to me, and usually a citation as well, but I never once went to those sources to verify it. I trusted what I was being told and what I had been raised on. I believed that the evidence being presented to me was actually factual, because we, as Christians, and like God, valued truth. We are not supposed to lie, and God detests lying, so I accepted what the godly people producing my school books would tell me. I accepted and therefore believed what I was being told by my parents, who also received their information from godly sources, such as Ken Ham and other creationists, as well as their institutions. And how could they be wrong? The information they present coincided with the Bible in a seemingly perfect way, perhaps even a divine way. It was the truth that had been handed down to us directly from God Himself via the Bible. Or so I thought. And now I had to start doubting a little what I was raised on. Potholer 54 painstakingly addressed many objections to the theory of evolution. These were objections that I believed were valid and could therefore disregard the theory of evolution. Unfortunately, the people I had trusted for so long about such a foundational issue to me were not misinterpreting data, and it wasn't that they were viewing things through a different set of lenses. They were, by all definitions, lying to me about the evidence for evolution. Potholer 54 would often point out when the ninth commandment was being broken by those representing the creationist viewpoint. At this point, I was pretty shocked. I was able to verify directly for myself many of the things that Potholer 54 presented. Despite this, it did not sway my faith in God. The house of cards was beginning to fall. I just hadn't realized it yet. I adjusted my opinion of the beginning to something like, I don't know what really happened, but God does. After all, God is omnipotent, and whatever it was, or whatever method He really used, then that's what He did. And I became okay with saying, I don't know, to a degree. Did people really live on Earth at the same time as the dinosaurs? I didn't know, but I could still see it happening both ways. It really didn't matter, though. So what did matter? Salvation. That was really it. This life was just a vapor in the light of eternity, but this was the time I needed to make sure I had salvation. I didn't believe that knowing the exact way this all got started was critical to salvation. As far as I could tell, salvation was really simple. If you believe in your heart and confess with your tongue, you will be saved. That was what really mattered, and I did believe. More than ever, as my marriage was falling apart and while I was coping with losing my kids and imagining the terrible life my kids now had in front of them, my reliance on God to get me through was critical. We were going to Christian counseling and getting more involved at church. Things that I had been so lax on before that surely were the reasons I found myself getting divorced at all. Guilt I felt for my past actions and backsliding significant causes of my current situation. One thing I was happy to say throughout the divorce, I never blamed God, and I never resented Him. I knew that ultimately, as the head of the household, I personally failed, and that was on me. My wife's actions were also ultimately on me as well for lack of leadership. I did often plead with God, but there was a deafening silence. I would often cry out to God to speak to me as I was growing up. As most Christians experience, we have our good times and our bad times in regards to our relationship with Christ. It might not be that way for the really good Christians, but for me, it was an intense roller coaster ride. Sometimes it would be a month at a time of feeling so close to God. And then for equally long stretches, I felt miles away. Even as far away from God as I felt, and even when I would go for long stretches of time not picking up my Bible, it wasn't cause I was doubting. It was cause I just didn't feel like it. Looking back, perhaps it was because I would feel so burnt out from the high times. I remember going to a church retreat called an encounter and going up for prayer. My only request was that God would speak to me. I just wanted to hear him. Other people were apparently hearing from God all the time, being prompted to do this or that, or God giving them a message for a friend or for the congregation. What was I doing wrong? Why didn't God want to even say one word to me, ever? I won't say I was frustrated because I didn't feel that. My passion would just eventually dim and fizzle until the next time I became desperate or someone else fired me up again. I would rededicate myself to God either during a church service or just during my quiet time. Whenever I had that feeling that this time, I won't stop until God hears my case. Even the unjust judge, worn out by persistence, would honor a request. My God, being the just judge, will be eager to honor this simple request, to know him and be closer to him and to deepen our relationship. It didn't work out that way though. Dedicated as I was ever capable of, there was always silence on the other end of the prayer line. It didn't matter though. This isn't why I believed. It was just something that would have been nice.